Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
This is Science for Humans with Dr. Jeff Galini.
Hey, Dr. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Carl. How about you?
Fantastic. So this was an idea that we had, Dr. Jeff and I, since we're doing this other interview. We wanted to kind of talk about genetically modified foods in a broader scope and more of a one-on-one fashion for people who still aren't clear. And quite frankly, there are a lot of people that still aren't clear about what GMOs even are, right, Dr. Jeff?
Yeah, they just all of a sudden started appearing on labels, GMO free. And as you and I were talking about things that, most people either have an opinion about this or have no idea or have not even heard about it. But it's definitely controversial.
Well, and the reality is you better have you better know about it. You may be developing an opinion about it, but you better know about it because it's being foisted on you. You're eating it day in and day out right now.
And I think that's the thing that, Carl, most bothered me as I was researching for this particular show is the fact that we are eating GMO things and we were never given an opportunity to make that choice if we wanted them.
Well, and now with the HR 1599, I believe it is, the DARK Act that has passed the House of Representatives by a majority vote, they don't want you to know what's in your food. They don't want you to know that it's GMO or not. They say, they being the government, which quite frankly is a puppet organization for Monsanto and other large agrochemical companies, they say that, if people know there's genetically modified foods in there, they'll become afraid of them and they won't buy them. Well, then it's the job of those agriculturally chemical enhanced food product manufacturers to make an argument and bring it to the forefront and show us that it's safe.
We as providers have to do that with every other industry, whether it's clothing, cars. Don't we have to make an appeal to what the benefits are to buy our product? So it's kind of like, why, does the food industry not have to do the same thing that we all have to do in other industries?
Well, and I, what I think the reason for that is, Dr. Jeff, is because I'm not saying that genetic modification technology is inherently evil, sinister, or even bad and dangerous. What I am saying is, the reason you genetically modify a food may play a greater role in whether or not it's going to be safe for consumption than whether or not it's genetically modified. And I'd like to explain what I mean by that. Most of the genetically modified crops today are genetically modified not because they do something better for the person who eats them. It's because they do something better for the industry that farms them. Genetic modifications on crops generally are designed to resist herbicides, so that farmers can slather entire fields with herbicides and kill only the weeds and not the corn or the soy. And that's not a good reason to genetic modify foods, because we already have done shows that show that genetically modified soy and genetically modified corn do not produce a substantially greater amount of yield per acre to justify the extra cost it requires to grow them. It's a loss for the farmers.
Well, and that's exactly it. I think it started, I've actually got a time frame we're going to talk about here, but maybe we'll just let everybody know we're kind of talking like GMOs, like everybody knows what that means. But that stands for genetically modified organisms. They also call it transgenic organisms. But it's basically any material, anything that has been altered genetically, no matter what the technique is. And it's kind of interesting when I went back and looked at the time frames. I thought this was relatively a newer phenomena, but 1935 was when DNA was discovered. It wasn't until 1973 that the recombinant DNA was created. 1975, this is interesting. A bunch of biologists and some lawyers and a few doctors got together to put together the whole guidelines for the whole world for engineering DNA. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Wow.
They didn't call you, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't that old in 75. But in 1980, the first GMO patent was issued. 1982, FDA approved the first GMO. And interestingly enough, the first one was for insulin and humulin. So they're basically now growing this from bacteria. It wasn't until 1994 that GMOs hit the grocery stores. I did not realize they have been on the shelf since 1994. The Flavar Savar tomato, which was designed to not ripen.
Yeah, right, exactly. So they could pick it and ship it, and it wouldn't ripen until it got closer to the store and the consumer.
And then it kind of continues. In 1996, we start to come up with the GMO-resistant weeds. New patents, patents are expiring, battles are happening. But, as I look back, I mean, the government, the agriculture department, the whole reason for doing this was to make a bigger tomato, more abundant tomatoes for the world's population. I think it started with a good idea. Again, that's just my personal opinion. But as Carl said, now the benefits for introducing GMO into the foods are, number one, creating plants that are better resistant to weeds, pests, and diseases. It's all about the dollar, I mean, whether they're good or bad for you, let's face it, it's all about the mighty dollar.
Well, and it's also a result of monoculture farming, right? So, we know that there are people out there who are organic farmers and biodynamic farmers that don't have the problems with weeds and pests that the monoculture farmers do. And that's because when you just grow soy, just grow corn, just grow wheat, you are disrupting the natural continuum of the environment. And so they are plagued by problems that are caused by the way they farm. But okay, you're not going to change the way people farm. So let's look at some of these genetic modifications. Dr. Jeff, how do they genetically modify an organism? What do they do?
I mean, we're talking about literally, getting into the laboratory and revamping that whole DNA structure for that particular item. So speaking about a tomato, it has a DNA as humans or anything else, and they are modifying that in order to get it to do what they want. So with the first tomato, the DNA was modified so that it would shelf ripen. It would no longer ripen on the vine, making it easier for shipping companies, production, farmers to ship product. You don't have things going bad. But it's the same with any type of genetic engineering, whether it's food, humans, animals. You're messing with DNA.
And let's not forget that the difference between a human and a chimpanzee is one gene. So when you talk about genetic modification, you go, oh, well, yeah, they changed one gene and so it takes longer to ripen. What's the big deal? There could be a very big deal. The problem is that industry is not doing testing on this food before they're feeding it to people. The FDA says that it's generally regarded as safe because it's similar to the crops that are non-genetically modified. We're finding out this isn't true.
Well, and there are a lot of studies. I mean, I found over 600 plus published, studies that, show the benefits of genetically modifying foods, the safety. And close to 30% of those publications were produced by companies that weren't associated with the seed growers. Now, the other 70% were all the seed growers. So, there is a lot of studies out there. But, the other thing that caught my eye is, do you know that they have already developed GMO for fish and livestock and poultry?
Yes. In fact, this current administration approved a genetically modified salmon that is made up of some of the genetic material from an eel. And this is my problem with genetic modification. We understand hybridization. We understand evolutionary selection pressure. We understand species change over time. But they are changing organically. okay, you would never see an eel and a salmon mate. So they would never produce a combination eel, salmon, fish. But when you go into the laboratory and you create this Frankenstein of sorts, and you say, well, we want the qualities of the eel because it grows faster, it's more aggressive, and we want to put it in a salmon, so we have a salmon that's more aggressive and grows faster. That would never happen in nature. Now you are messing with things that you shouldn't be. And quite frankly, the fish producers today are worried about that salmon getting out in the wild because it's so much more aggressive than the regular salmon that it will actually go out and destroy and eat and outcompete and grow faster than the regular salmon. And they're saying, you know what? It could be 10, 15 years and we won't have normal natural salmon anymore.
Well, and you saw the movie Jurassic Park, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, man. When you start messing with genetics, something is going to go wrong. Not, I wonder if something is, but it is. I even noticed here locally, we got a whole bunch of black rabbits that are in the wild. Now I realize, somebody released a black rabbit and, it bred out there. But the point is that, these things will get into our food supply. They have no way of not letting that happen because somebody's going to be able to buy one of those salmon, is going to keep it for a fish, pet, and decide they're tired with it, and then they're going to go dump it in the lake.
Dr. Jeff, what about hybridization? Is that genetic modification in of itself?
Not really. What's your thoughts on that, Carl?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that when you take a plant and put it with another plant and it grows on its own and it continues to grow and have continued offspring, that is kind of like evolutionary manipulation. You're just kind of putting two things together that may have found their way together anyway.
Yeah, and I think, we've been doing that with different species of apples and pears. I mean, those are all things that, like you said, if it can happen naturally, and the only thing that keeps it from happening is the fact that, one source is grown in Asia and one source is grown in America. Again, I think it's fun to come up with new food sources. But again, getting in and modifying it, where does it stop,
Yeah.
And even reading through these studies, there are a couple studies out there that are really set against it. But at the end of the day, I just think it's all a little sloppy. I think, it was really put out there. There's a lot of driving dollars. And similar to the pharmaceutical industry, I don't believe there's no side effects to genetically modifying. I don't exactly know what they are. But from what I read, it comes down to really 4 things that, are associated with these particular risks: allergies, toxicities, nutrient imbalance, and decreasing diet diversity.
Yeah. Yeah, and these are all real problems. What I'd like to do is take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about this on the other side. We're talking right now with Dr. Jeff Galini, my co-host here on Science for Humans, and this is actually setting the stage for a discussion later in the show. We're talking about genetically modified foods. If you don't know what they are, you better find out, because chances are you, your family, have already been exposed to them, and they could be the root of issues that you have developed in your health. They may not, they may. And that's the discussion when we come back from the break. Stay tuned. Do you know how to properly use carbohydrates to ignite your performance in the field and in the gym? You will now, thanks to this free book by EFX Sports. The Carb User's Guide for Maximum Performance reveals why omitting carbohydrates from your diet can totally crush your gains. Ever wonder how many grams you need for your specific sport? Not anymore. We give you the critical number you need to dominate your competition. You'll even discover the super carb that's taking the athletic world by storm. You must try it to believe it. Go to getcarbolyn.com/carb guide today and get your copy absolutely free. Once again, it's GETKARBOLYN.com/CARBGUIDE.
Spit that out right now. This is the Superhuman Channel.
It was summertime in northern Michigan.
Welcome back to Science for Humans with Dr. Jeff Galini and myself. We're talking about GMO foods. This is kind of a primer 101, just to kind of set the stage for the discussion later in the show. Dr. Jeff, do you personally eat GM foods?
You know, that's a good question, Carl. You know, I have actually been trying to eat more organic.
Right.
And I'm assuming, you know, according to Whole Foods, I just looked up, you know, Whole Foods says, if you're not familiar with Whole Foods Marketplace, that all of their organics are certified non-GMO. So right. I'm now assuming that the organic seeds are not GMO. Yes. But Carl, I'm actually trying to eat more of those when I go to the store. But, you know, what do you do when you go out to eat?
Yes, exactly. So, that's exactly the frustration.
I'm a little nervous now. You know, when you go out and you have a salad, I'm thinking, man, I don't know what's in this.
Well, you know, and there's a lot of people out there who say, well, it's the pesticides, it's the herbicides, it's not the GM. And I have to tell you, anybody who's listening now, you must stay around for the second hour because this is going to be a game-changing discussion today about soy. But what about you? Now, you live in the heart of big ag. I mean, you're in Montana. There's huge farms there. Farming is a way of life. Have you had any discussions with any people who have positions in this at all?
I have. You know, I discussed with multiple farmers. And again, I'm all for the farmer. But one of the things I realized, Carl, is there's a difference between great-grandpa first-generation farmer and the new age farmer. You know, back in the old days, I mean, the whole farming thing was to develop something that's pure, wholesome, you know, grown in the backyard, where, you know, as those generations increased, it became more of about the profit. I think the old farmers really hardly made a living. I mean, they lived off of what they had. But a friend of mine who works, he's back working for the ag department. He's one of those brainiac genetic engineers, and he's dedicated his whole career and college to creating a bigger tomato. Now, he's all for the fact that he's doing this to feed the world. You know, that there are people that, you know, have minimal sizes of crop space available, so they've got to maximize it. And I said, you know, hey, I understand. I don't want to dispute that because, you know, farming is important. I said, but how do you guys go about, you know, attesting the safety? And he told me that it's really done on a case-by-case basis. So you really can't do one tomato and then assume that every tomato that's grown everywhere, you really got to look at each crop on a case-by-case basis.
But they don't do that. There's been
not do that. And, you know, what I'm learning here is, you know, our ground, our soil, and what our farmers do is different than what happens in Nebraska, or out your way. You know, I mean, It's different, you know. And even we were talking about allergens and things. You know, if a farmer thinks that, you know, he needs to put more Roundup on, if he can afford it, he will, because he doesn't want to lose that crop. So, you know, I think there's more issues to the whole genetic modified situation than just, you know, what they've done to the seeds.
And that's part of the problem.
What the farmers can do with crops. That's really my biggest concern right now. I'm inconclusive on whether or not GMO food is dangerous for me, but I am concerned about what they're able to put on those foods now that they've genetically modified that.
And that was my point. Most of the genetic modifications have been designed to make the industry better at what they do, not make a better product for the consumer. And industry will argue, well, if we do better, the consumer does better, but that's not true. And the case in point that you're pointing out, we did the show where there's research that shows that glyphosate sales, Roundup sales have gone up, not down, in the face of genetic modified Roundup ready crops. And one would say, well, how could that be? And it's because these farmers are having to use more Roundup. And so that's the big lie. These crops require more Roundup because the weeds are getting stronger, and hence now they're introducing 2,4-D. One of the components that was in Agent Orange was just approved by the USDA and FDA to be sprayed on crops because guess what? Roundup's not working anymore because just like any evolutionary process, the weeds have gotten stronger. And so now we're going to be exposed to 2,4-D, which the chemical industry says is safe, but there's a lot of studies out there that show that it's very, very dangerous. And your kids and your grandkids are going to be eating it off of their corn pretty soon.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's what irritates me. You know, I saw that the patents on the original Roundup have expired, and that particular gentleman has now a Roundup 2 that's being released, which might be what you're talking about. But again, you know, that's what bothers me is, you know, I have complained on numerous shows as we're talking about our food sources, but the food has no taste anymore. They have so genetically modified a tomato that it doesn't even taste like a tomato.
Right.
And I don't believe that it's got more nutrients. You know, they're talking about they do this because now there's more nutrients and vitamin. I don't believe that. No. You know, I think it's all about there's a tomato, you put it on a salad, and it doesn't go bad.
That's something that supplies the industry with benefit, not the end user. And so here's my personal opinion. And I told you this story, and I've actually said this on the show before. I grew up in New York. We had subways. And there are subway gratings in the ground where the air exchange between the subway and the above ground occurs. And sometimes you'll be walking down a street and you'll see one of these, and it'll look flimsy. So I guess the question then becomes, let's say it's got a 50-50 chance that you'll fall through and you won't. Do you challenge that chance or do you walk around it? I'm the kind of person who goes, that thing looks rickety. I'm not going to challenge it. It may not fall in, but who wants to learn? I'll just walk around it. And that's how I feel about genetically modified foods. The industry has not done enough research on it to say that it's truly safe. They have already started feeding it to people for way too long, as you pointed out in this show. And I am not willing to subject myself to that risk. So for now, until it's proven to me unequivocally that it's safe to eat, I'm just staying away from it.
Yeah, and let me encourage everyone to, you know, support your local organic farmers. I know it's more expensive, but there's a reason why. If you've ever grown a garden at home, you don't do it because you save money. You do it because you love what you're doing and you want to do something quality for your family. So, you know, support these small stores that do sell organics. And I'll tell you what, you will definitely find a taste difference between an organic banana and a regular banana, and the same thing with a homegrown tomato versus, you know, a GMO tomato.
Oh, man, it's so true. And you and I talked about the bananas, right?
We have, and, you know, I've now been strictly buying organic bananas, and I won't even eat a regular banana now. Yeah. So I've kind of got that mindset where I understand it's going to be 10 or 15 cents more, but you know what? It actually tastes good.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Real quick, we've gotten a lot of great responses on Crealkaline. We're getting a lot of people who are sending emails in asking for us to do certain shows. The Crealkaline offer is still standing for those of you out there who have never tried the single best creatine monohydrate product in the world, the only patented buffered creatine monohydrate product in the world. Get a free sample. Go to superhumanradio.com, bottom right-hand corner. You'll see a banner that says Ask the Scientist. It's got a picture of Dr. Jeff on it. Click it and request a free sample of Crealkaline. Try it for yourself. Don't forget to include your mailing address. More and more people are including their mailing address now, aren't they?
They've been real good. And, you know, don't be afraid. Go ahead and email me. I do answer all those. Sometimes it might take a day or so, but I really enjoy speaking with you folks, answering your questions. There's been some good recommendations for some shows that we're looking at. But again, you know, the best way to use a supplement is to try it first. As we say in Montana, you should never buy a horse that you haven't rode first.
Yeah, I like that one. And we're going to end the show on that one. Dr. Jeff, thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you much, Carl.